What's going on, Netrunner fans? This is Shmar here, back again. Today we are doing a deck building video of the Corp deck that I brought to GenCon. This year I was super lucky. I ended up making the top 16. I'm not sure what I was expecting really when I went to GenCon. Last year I made the cut from Flight 1 into the Saturday part of the tournament. This year, because I hadn't played as much as I did last year, I wasn't really expecting too much. So I just brought these two decks, figured I'd go out, have fun, and see what happens. I ended up going 10, 3, and 1. I had a timed tie as Corp, but that was enough to make the cut. I ended up in 11th after 7 rounds of Swiss and was invited to top 16 day 2. So this is a deck building video for the EtF deck that I brought to GenCon that got me into the top 16. It did very well during Swiss. Unfortunately, didn't do too hot during the top 16 as I was matched up with the perfect counter to the deck, but we'll discuss that later. So for those of you who are new to the deck building videos on my channel, I go through card by card first and build a deck, even though it's already up on Netrunner DB and published. So for those of you who are familiar with my deck building process or don't want to see the cards going up one by one, you can simply just go over to Netrunner DB and look up Throne Runner and you'll find the deck there. But for everybody else, stay tuned as we will go through the decks as we usually do. So the first thing that we're going to start with is the agendas. This is a deck. If you look at the name on Netrunner DB, the name is I believe it's Master Roshi, and the reason why I call it Master Roshi, for those Dragon Ball fans, Master Roshi wears a turtle shell on his back, and this is kind of a slower paced turtle style deck, high taxing and trying to keep your opponent out. So in a deck like that, you're going to want to play 7 agendas. So I played number 1 was Eden Fragment. I included 2 fragments in this deck. So Eden Fragment, ignore the install cost of the first piece of ice you install each turn. Obviously this is a huge agenda to have in the deck because with EtF's ability, you gain credit for the first install. So if you make that first install a piece of ice in an already iced up server, you're gonna get that EtF credit regardless of if the server has 1 piece of ice going into it or 7. So that's the Eden Fragment. Next is the Hades Fragment. Immediate noise counter, and basically just gives you the ability to recycle some cards. So Eve campaigns, Ash campaigns, whatever have you. When your turn begins, you may add 1 card from archives to the bottom of R&D. Next is the Priority Rex. Obviously you're going to want these because if you're playing a turtle deck out of HB, that means you're going to have some very large Bioroid ice. So 2 Pyrex. Obviously when you score priority requisition, you may res a piece of ice, ignoring all costs. It lets you get out that sexy Heimdall 2.0 for what feels to be almost free. 2 Project Wotens. If I could just get this going here. Project Wotan. Choose a res piece of Bioroid ice currently being approached. For the remainder of this run, that ice gains an end the run subroutine after all its other subroutines. This deck has a lot of Bioroid, so if you score Project Wotan, you're definitely going to have a ton of targets to run that on. So that's 2 Wotens. And then lastly, you probably guessed it, is an NAPD contract. 2 points, but obviously the runner has to spend 4 credits to steal it. So it sucks for them if they get it. You don't really want to score this one. This is for R&D or archive access, just forcing the runner to drop a couple credits. So that rounds us out at 20 agenda points, which gives us enough to make a Corp deck of 49 cards. So next we're going to move into the assets, but before we do that, we're going to switch up the order just a little bit and jump into the Breaker Bay grids, because this has immediate impact on our assets. So this card is a fantastic card. Obviously it's been played a lot out of HB decks for this reason. The res cost of cards in this server is lowered by 5. So that means Eve campaign has a res cost of 5. You now res it for free and immediately start benefiting off that. Adonis campaigns you benefit off of immediately. Caprices, Ashes, whatever have you, all those are resing and saving you money, and this has a res cost of 0. So this card is huge. So we're going to do that upgrade before we talk about the other upgrades, just as I start throwing down some assets for you guys. So obviously, as already mentioned, we have the Adonis campaign. Easy 3 copies. We all know what it does. It's just some quick drip economy. and when it comes off of a breaker bay, you're making a ton of money off of it. Continuing with the econ, we have Eve campaigns, another triple. This one obviously is an auto include in every corp deck. 3 Jackson Howards. We all know what Jackson does by this point. And lastly, a card that is very controversial. A lot of people don't think that it's a useful card. However, I was shown otherwise during the Toronto Regionals at Legends Warehouse. IT department. So this card, you kind of want to have an idea of how it works. There's a mathematical equation that links to this card, or an algebraic equation, to figure out how much strength you're actually boosting pieces of ice by. And that equation is n plus bracket n times k close bracket. So where n is the number of tokens that you're spending, and k is the number of tokens on IT department. So that's n plus n times k. If you get confused, simply just use counters. I use dice when I use this, but you can use counters and just refer back to however many tokens are left on IT department to figure out what the boost is. So I'll probably do an example of how that works a little bit later, but this is a very, very fantastic card to have in the deck. So 2 IT departments. That leaves us with 11 assets as we move into the upgrades. As I already mentioned, one very important upgrade is going to be Ash. Whenever there is a successful run on this server, Trace 4, if successful, the runner cannot access any cards other than Ash for the remainder of this run. For those who don't know, this has very obvious uses. If you're trying to score out a 3-point agenda, which has a 5 advancement cost, you're not gonna be able to do that in one turn. So you want to have Ash out on the table to kind of give you that ability to have 2 turns to score your agenda, because you want the runner to get bummed on this card and have to waste that run accessing Ash and trashing it and then running again, and potentially excuse me, having to beat this beautiful lady Caprice Nisei for a second time. So there's 2 copies of Caprice. Whenever the runner passes all ice protecting this server, you and the runner secretly spend 0, 1, or 2 credits. Reveal spent credits if you and the runner spent a different number of credits and the run. So you res Caprice first, you play the side game. If they get through, then they hit Ash. They got to deal with the trace on Ash. If you beat them in the trace, the only thing that they can trash is Ash. Then they have to run that server again, play the side game all over again, and you can see how that starts to get annoying. So because of limited influence, there are only 2 copies of Caprice Nisei in this deck. And then the last upgrade is one that causes a lot of trouble when used in conjunction with IT department, and that's 1 copy of Corporate Troubleshooter. I was trying to figure out a way to get 2 copies of this card in, but I found that it really wasn't necessary to have 2. It's a card that you really don't want the runner to know that you have, which I'll show you why as we continue with the deck build. 3 operations, don't play many events, it's just 3 hedge funds, and then we continue into our ice. So as I said, the ice in this deck is meant to be very taxing and meant to be very painful when you use IT department with it or the Corporate Troubleshooter with it, and just meant to pretty much deter the runner from making too many runs in a turn. I found that while I was playing the tournament, I forced many runners to have to spend most of their turns finding ways to click up credits, Katie Jones, Procon, and things like that, to build up for one big run, and then have to reset, build up again, make one big run. So we'll start with the barrier ice, standard 3 Eli's. We all know at this point what Eli does because he shows up in a lot of decks. Then we have Heimdall 1.0 and Heimdall 2.0, just 1 copy of each of those big guys. So here's Heimdall 1, Corset card, we all know him. And then Heimdall 2 from the first big box expansion. which forces the runner to spend a double click, do one brain damage, and end the run, and again end the run. The res cost on this is very high, but again, this deck has lots of econ. I found there was many games where I would res Heimdall 2.0 without even so much as blinking. It was just, yeah, you want to run, okay, I have 30 credits, boom, Heimdall, deal with it. So one of those for a total of 5 barriers. Next, we move into the code gates, and this is what we saved the rest of our influence for, was for Inazuma. 3 cost, 5 strength code gate. First sub, the runner cannot break any subroutines on the next piece of ice he or she encounters during this run. Heimdall 2.0. The runner cannot jack out until after encountering the next piece of ice during this run. Heimdall 2.0. So we got 2 copies of those. One of my favorite cards now at this point in the game here is Turing. It's a 4 cost code gate with 2 strength, but it gains 3 strength if it's in a remote server, and cannot be broken by AI programs, which is huge. End the run unless the runner spends 3 clicks. So you want to make sure that if you're putting something important, like an IT department, for example, behind a Turing, you're going to want to have something else on top of that, possibly something that requires a click to get through, some sort of Bioroid, so Eli, or even just an annoying Ichi or something like that, so that the runner does not just run this, spend 3 clicks, come in and trash your IT department. Make them have to find another way, excuse me, to break through the Turing. So there's 3 copies of those. And then lastly is Victor 2.0 to round out our code gates. And there's 2 copies of that. Again, it's a double click to break Victor 2.0. He has 1 trace, which if it's successful, it gives him a power icon. You can use that icon to do a brain damage whenever you feel fit. And then lastly is an end the run. So if you have, for example, a Turing and a Victor that's protecting your IT department, that is pretty good, pretty taxing, and it's going to cause the runner a lot of trouble. And the last 8 cards, as you can probably guess, are all sentries. So there's a lot of ice in this deck. You need a lot of ice in this deck. Like I said, it's a turtling deck. It's not too slow of a deck, but you definitely want to make sure that you play with a high amount of ice, because otherwise it's going to be very rough. It's not going to be taxing enough, and the runner's just going to keep applying pressure until they hit those agendas, because they only need 3 to win. You only need 3 to win, so you do kind of want to protect yourself a little bit. So the most important is the Architect. Why? Because 1, Architect cannot be parasited, because Architect cannot be trashed while installed. If they run into it and face check it, you get to search the top 5 cards of your deck to install. You search the top 5 and install any one of them, and because it's on the runner's turn, you're going to gain a credit for EtF, which is fantastic. And then the second subroutine is that you can install a card from Archives or HQ, paying all costs. There were many occasions where a runner would spend a lot of time and money getting into the IT department server, trash it, hit an Inazuma into an Architect, and IT department comes back into that server, and I would click it 3 times right away. So you can see how this card becomes very annoying very quickly if the runner doesn't set themselves up in such a way to deal with this. For example, by making sure that they install Mimic before they start face checking ice. Even still, that 2 credits is pretty taxing early game if you have Architects all over the place. So there's 3 of those. You want to see it early. That's probably one of your best early game pieces, along with Turing and Eli. So that's 9 early game ice that you kind of want to see in your first hand, and I mulligan aggressively for those ice. Next, we've got 2 Ichi 1.0s, so 2 trashes and a tag and brain damage for $5. I don't usually res this early game. Obviously, the runner does a lot of face checking with nothing out, so Ichi's kind of useless at that point. You kind of want to save it until later in the game, in a situation where you know you can get at least one of these trashes off without the runner being able to spend clicks to break. So we've got 2 Ichis, 1 Ichi 2.0, which I didn't really get to trigger this too much. I did res it most games, but I didn't get to reap any of the benefits of the subroutines. It's kind of just there to tax and scare the runner off of a certain server for at least a little bit. So just one of those, because you don't really need it too often. Roto Turret, fantastic early game. Only one copy of it, but if you use it with Corporate Troubleshooter or with IT department, then you're going to get that key trash. And the programs that I usually trash when I'm given the chance are code gate breakers. Why? Because Turing, because Inazuma, and not so much because of Victor, but mostly Inazuma and Turing is why you want to get rid of the code gates and keep the runner limited in that sense. So that's Roto Turret. And then finally, the MVP, one Janus. One Janus because, again, the runner doesn't usually see it. If there's only one copy in the game, there are going to be games when I don't see it. There's going to be games when they don't see it. But the games when I do see it and I feel like I need some kind of, not so much a Hail Mary, but just a trap setup that the runner doesn't really think about. So for example, if I'm playing a noise player, and this happened in round 5 of the tournament, playing a noise player, first turn I installed Janus over Architect. Later on in the game, I installed Inazuma over top of that Janus. Sorry, I installed Janus over Archives, excuse me, and then I installed Inazuma over that Janus and just, let it sit there. And I let it sit for a while, a couple of turns, until he felt comfortable. I let him run Archives, didn't res, until he gave me one opportunity. He had 4 cards in hand. He ran it on his third click, I believe. I had, I want to say 25 credits ish, 24, 25, and I hit the Inazuma. I bumped it with IT department, waited. He had nothing that he could do to get by. Straight into the Janus. That's 4 brain damage. So he could only sit with 1 card in a noise deck that's playing Wildside and Faust. It was very, very rough for him. And earlier in the tournament as well, I got a Inazuma Janus kill on it wasn't a noise. I think it was on a Kate player. So it is a nice card to have, just laying in wait as a surprise if the game starts to draw out, and you need something that'll help you win the game a little bit more quickly or whatever have you. And you just kind of set it up and put it in a position where you know that eventually they're going to have to make that run, and you have something there that is going to stop them, be it a loaded IT department or your corporate troubleshooter sitting in a remote server with Janus and Inazuma in it. So that's totally up to you to choose. So that's the 49 cards there. So in terms of strategies for playing this deck and what got me to top 16, number 1 was not getting too crazy about R&D. So you got to trust that with a 1 in 7 chance of pulling an agenda on a single card access of R&D, you got to trust your deck and not spend too much time and too much money rezzing ice early over R&D. So there were a lot of times where, yes, I would put ice down over R&D, obviously to get that credit for EtF, especially if I had a fragment, Eden fragment squad already, get that EtF credit, and I would let them access. And it's a 1 in 7 chance. So there were many times where they didn't see agendas. I even let a couple of Maker's Eyes go with an installed R&D interface, and those whiffed as well. So you got to trust R&D and make sure that your early focus is getting those Eve campaigns and Adonises out. Even if you install the Eve campaign and don't have a Breaker Bay for it, and let's say you have like 7 credits, I still res the Eve. I spend the 5, I res the Eve, and then you'll start your turn with $4, and that's 5 that the runner has to spend their next turn to deny you. Most times they won't do it, and that Eve then starts to build up and pay off for you, and then later on you'll find your Breaker Bay and install another Eve, res it, or an Adonis, res it, whatever have you. On top of that, I do install naked Adonises that aren't protected, and I will res those as well. I give myself as many opportunities as I can to get my drip econ going. The worst thing that could happen is that the runner runs and trashes it the next turn, but even still, I feel that because of EtF's ability, you kind of come out on top because they're spending a click and money to get rid of it. And for you, it's kind of whatever. You're going to trigger an architect and get it back anyways. And at that point, they're not going to want to run it and trash it again. So don't be shy in getting those Adonises and Eves out and working early. The next thing is IT department. When you get IT department out, it's not worth it to res IT department and click it once. You definitely want to res it and click it all 3 times. Res it, spend your entire turn, and put 3 tokens on that IT department right away. Whether it's unprotected or not, you want to do it anyways because it's for the trash. And again, they have to run it, trash that, and then they're still worrying about running and trashing your drip economy as well. And it's a huge deterrent. It's going to keep them focused on other things. And again, if you hit the architect at the right time, you're going to get that IT department back, possibly even on a breaker bay. In a breaker based server, res it for free and do it again. So get those ITs going. In terms of protecting them, I generally aim for, like I said, a Turing and a Victor 2.0. So I double stack code gates, or I go for an Eli and a Turing, some kind of combination like that that makes it very taxing for the runner to get in. So say they had Corroder out and they break that Eli for 4, and then they click through Turing for whatever reason, and then spend another 4 for the IT department. That's 8 credits in their entire turn. So there's no harm in that. There's no shame in your game if you're playing IT department that way. So you want to res it and click it. I usually res it, click it 3 times, give the turn back. When my turn comes back around, I'll install a card, click IT department 2 more times. That way, IT department already has 5 counters on it. The first ice that I boost is going to get +4 strength, and that's even more stuff that the runner has to deal with. So you build up your deck that way. You'll slowly find your agendas. While you're playing the game, you do want to build up the remote server that you're going to score it in. Obviously, that remote is going to have the Caprice Nisei in it, and it's going to have the Ash in it, and a Breaker Bay. That's the 3 that you want to have in there to keep that server secure and keep the agendas that you play in there secure. And you want your HQ to be well protected. That way, when you do pull those agendas, you're not too worried about HQ accesses, because you know it's going to cost the runner a lot to get in there. So, as I said, the deck is already up on Netrunner DB. I prefer to do the video rather than do the write-up there. So there's going to be a link from Netrunner DB to this video, and there's also going to be a link from this video to the Netrunner DB deck if you want to just download it that way and try it out. So let me know what you think. Let me know if there's any changes that you think could be made. One that was brought to my attention was potentially switching out one of the Ichi 1.0s, or potentially the Ichi 2.0 for a Sagittarius, because the Sagittarius, if unbroken, it's a trace 2. If you win the trace, trash a program, and if you boost a trace to 5 or more, trash a program. So it's potentially 2 trash, guaranteed 1 trash if you res it at the right time, and are able to boost it by 3. So you pay 3 to get rid of the runner's code gate breaker, for example. So that's a good addition that was brought to my attention. I'm going to test that out moving forward. But like I said, let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any successes with it, or if there's any other gaping holes that you see or changes that you want to make. But yeah, I hope you enjoy it. I know I enjoyed playing it. It got me to top 16. Top 16 was super fun. Met a ton of people and people that recognized me. However, so that was very fun. GenCon was a great experience. And moving forward, you can expect a lot of Game of Thrones 2.0. I'm not going to do any unboxings or anything like that because Team Covenant pretty much took care of that. But we're going to have some deck building for that and some strategy videos for that as well as gameplay between myself and Tim and a couple other friends who were there and picked up the game as well. So I hope you enjoyed the deck building video. And like I said, feel free to hit me up at NetRunnerDB, Google+, email throne.runner@gmail.com or whatever have you. And if you have Octagon, my name is ShammyG, ShammIEG, and I'm always down for a game. So everybody take it easy, and thanks again for watching. Peace.